Have you ever heard a sound in your ceiling at night and told yourself it was nothing? What if it wasn't nothing? What if someone was watching you while you slept?
Story time.
Daniel Harper never believed in ghost stories. He was 37 years old, a father of 2, and worked long hours as an electrician. His wife, Sarah, often laughed at scary movies. Their children, Emma and Noah, loved running through the old farmhouse they had bought outside town. The house was over 100 years old. It creaked, it groaned, and every winter, strange sounds came from the attic. But old houses make noises. At least that was what Daniel always said. The sounds started small, a single thump above the ceiling, then another, then silence. Every few nights, Sarah would stop in bed and listen. Did you hear that? Daniel always gave the same answer. Probably rats. The answer worked for years. Then food started disappearing. Not much, just enough to feel strange. A few slices of bread, half a bottle of milk, a package of cookies. Sarah blamed the children. The children blamed each other. Life moved on. Then Emma turned 12. One morning, she came downstairs pale and shaking. There was someone in my room. Daniel looked up from his coffee. What? Emma's hands trembled. I woke up and saw somebody standing near my door. Sarah immediately hugged her. It was a dream. Emma shook her head. No. What did they look like? The girl hesitated. I couldn't see the face. Daniel searched the room later. Nothing. No footprints. No open windows. Nothing. Life continued. But the sounds above the ceiling became more frequent. 3 knocks. Pause. 2 knocks. Pause. 1 knock. Always after midnight. Always directly above Emma's room. One night, Daniel climbed into the attic with a flashlight. Dust covered everything. Old boxes sat untouched. Spider webs stretched from beam to beam. Nothing looked disturbed. No footprints. No signs of animals. No signs of people. He climbed down, feeling foolish. But something watched him leave. Hidden behind an old water tank, a pair of eyes slowly opened and waited for another year. The next strange thing happened during Christmas. Sarah noticed family photos were moving. At first, she thought she imagined it. A framed picture from the hallway appeared in the kitchen. Another photo moved from the living room to a shelf upstairs. Nobody admitted touching them. Daniel blamed the children. The children swore they didn't do it. One evening, Sarah noticed something else. A family photo had fallen behind a cabinet. When she picked it up, her stomach dropped. A scratch had been carved into the glass. 3 words. Not alone here. Sarah showed Daniel immediately. His face turned white. Someone had scratched the message from inside the frame. Not outside. Inside. That night, Daniel checked every lock in the house. For the first time in years, he felt afraid. The next morning, He called the police. They searched the property. Nothing. No signs of forced entry. No evidence. No suspects. The officer smiled politely. Probably kids. But Daniel knew something was wrong, because he never told the officer about the knocking pattern. Yet that night, after the police left, the knocks changed. Now they matched the officer's words. 3 knocks. Pause. Then a slow scrape. Then 3 more knocks. Almost like laughter. Someone knew they had called for help. Someone was listening, and they were still inside the house. 1 week later, Noah disappeared, only for 10 minutes. But those 10 minutes changed everything. Sarah found him sitting in the attic, alone. The boy stared blankly at a dark corner. "What are you doing up here?" Noah smiled. "I'm talking to Mr. Thomas." Sarah froze. "Who's Mr. Thomas?" "The man who lives up here." The boy pointed into darkness. Nothing was there. At least nothing Sarah could see. That night, nobody slept. Daniel armed himself with a baseball bat. At 2:13 a.m., they heard footsteps. Slow, heavy, directly above their bedroom. Not scratching, not rats. Footsteps, human footsteps. For nearly an hour. Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Then silence. The next morning, Daniel entered the attic again. This time he searched every inch. And finally, he found it. Behind stacked boxes, hidden beneath old insulation. A small wooden door. He had lived there 8 years and never noticed it. The door had no handle, no lock, only scratches, hundreds of scratches, as if somebody had spent years trying to claw their way out. Daniel slowly pulled it open. Behind the door was a narrow hidden space between the walls. A sleeping bag, empty food containers, bottles of water, and hundreds of photographs. Photographs of his family. Photographs of them eating, watching television, sleeping, crying. Photographs taken from inside the house. Someone had been living there. Someone had been watching them for years. But the worst photo sat on top. A picture of Daniel sleeping, taken the night before, and standing beside his bed was a thin, smiling man, looking directly into the camera. Daniel could not breathe. His hands shook so badly that the photograph slipped from his fingers. The smiling man in the picture looked thin and sick. His skin looked almost gray. His eyes were too wide. And the worst part was the date printed at the bottom. It said yesterday. Someone had stood beside Daniel's bed while he slept. Someone had taken the picture. Someone was still inside the house. Daniel grabbed every photograph and ran downstairs. Sarah nearly screamed when she saw them. Picture after picture showed their family living normal lives, eating breakfast, watching movies, sleeping, crying, arguing. Every private moment had been captured. Some photos were years old. Others had been taken only days ago. Emma suddenly pointed at one picture. Wait, everyone looked. The photo showed Noah sleeping in his room. Standing beside the bed was the smiling man. But there was someone else, a second figure, a shadow standing in the corner. Nobody could see its face. Nobody remembered that person. Daniel immediately called the police. This time, officers took the situation seriously. They searched the hidden space. Fingerprints covered the walls. Food wrappers filled several bags. The sleeping bag was still warm. Whoever lived there had left only minutes earlier. Police searched the entire property. Nothing. No footprints. No suspect. No sign of escape. It was as if the man had vanished into thin air. That night, the family stayed in a motel. Nobody slept. Around midnight, Daniel received a call from the lead officer. His voice sounded strange. "Mr. Harper, we found something." "What?" "There are records connected to your house." Daniel sat up. "What records?" The officer was silent for several seconds. Then he spoke. 8 years ago, a man named Thomas Reed disappeared. Daniel froze. The same name Noah had mentioned. Mr. Thomas. The officer continued. He was the previous owner's brother. He suffered from severe mental illness. One day he vanished. Nobody ever found him. Daniel felt cold, so he lived in the attic. We thought so. Thought. The officer took a deep breath. We found human remains. Daniel's blood turned to ice. What? In a sealed section of the attic wall. Sarah covered her mouth. Emma started crying. Noah looked confused. The officer continued. The remains belong to Thomas Reed. Daniel stared at the phone. That was impossible. If Thomas was dead, who was in the photographs? The next morning, police showed them evidence. The skeleton had been hidden inside the wall for 8 years. Dental records confirmed the identity. Thomas Reed had died years ago. Case closed, at least for the police. But Daniel knew something was wrong. The smiling man in the photos was not a skeleton. Someone had taken those pictures. Someone had moved through the house. Someone had spoken to Noah. And someone had scratched messages inside picture frames. 3 nights later, Daniel returned alone. He wanted answers. Police had finished their investigation. The house stood empty, dark, silent, waiting. At midnight, he climbed into the attic. His flashlight cut through darkness. Dust floated through the air. Everything looked abandoned. Then he heard it. A whisper, very soft, from behind the wall. Daniel followed the sound. The whisper grew louder. A man's voice. "I never left." Daniel's heart slammed against his chest. The voice came from the sealed area where police found the remains. That was impossible. The body had been removed. The space was empty. Yet the whisper continued. "I never left." Daniel slowly pointed his flashlight into the opening and froze. Someone was standing there. the smiling man, exactly like the photographs. Thin, gray skin, wide eyes, the same clothes, the same face. The man smiled. Then he pointed downward. At the floor, Daniel looked down. Scratched into the wood were hundreds of words, thousands, covering every inch, written over 8 years. One sentence repeated again and again. He is still here. Daniel suddenly realized something. The smiling man was not warning them. He was afraid, terrified of something else. A loud crash exploded behind him. Daniel spun around. The attic door had slammed shut. The temperature dropped instantly. The smiling man's face changed. His smile vanished. Pure fear filled his eyes. He backed away, away from Daniel, away from something behind him. Slowly, very slowly, a second figure stepped out of darkness, the shadow from the photographs. Tall, impossible tall. Its head nearly touched the ceiling. No face, no eyes, no mouth, only darkness. The smiling man screamed. Not a human scream. A scream filled with 8 years of terror. The shadow grabbed him and pulled him backward into darkness. The scream continued, then suddenly stopped. Silence. Daniel ran. He threw himself toward the attic door. The door burst open. He stumbled down the ladder, fell into the hallway, and ran outside. He never looked back. Never. The next day, the Harper family sold everything. They moved across the country. They never returned. Years passed. Life slowly became normal. The children grew older. The nightmares faded. Then one afternoon, Emma received a package. No return address. No note. Just a single photograph. Her hands trembled as she looked at it. The picture showed her apartment, taken from inside. At night, she was asleep in bed. Standing beside her was a smiling man. The same smiling man, Thomas Reed. But that wasn't the worst part. Behind Thomas stood the tall shadow, watching, waiting, and on the back of the photograph were 4 words written in shaky handwriting. He found me again.